Greetings everyone, Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Album of the Year. Happy Saturday to everybody. We have arrived at 1984, another spectacular year for new album releases. The 80s are in mid-swing. A lot of good stuff, a lot of good heavy music, a lot of great pop. Okay, new wave still riding fairly high on the charts. But more importantly, if you are a headbanger, 84 was a great year. So, as always, I had a handful, really special ones to me. Came down to three of them. Really came down to three of them. And again, like we say a lot, if we were to go back in time, I always like to take a look at what would have been my favorite back in the day or shortly thereafter. Okay, so back in the 80s, mid-80s, late 80s, even early 90s, what would I have said? And then I have to take into consideration, well, how do I feel about these same albums from like 1990 and up? Okay, so there's three of them here. Well, there's three of them that I'll eventually mention. Three of them. Two of them made the final grade, but one of them, the one that's not going to make the grade, not going to make the cut today, would have easily been the Forerunner back if we would have asked me this in 85, looking back at 1984 or any year throughout that decade. I would have easily said one, because it was an album that really, really just broke this band for me and got all the momentum going, worldwide for this band. And to this day, probably still my favorite album from that band. However, probably since like the early mid-90s, really don't listen to that band all that much anymore, although I still recognize and love those classic albums that they put out. So that leaves two others. All right, so that leaves my favorite, my winner, and my runner-up. And both of these two are among my top favorite bands of all time. One of them was a big comeback record. The other one was probably the album that really started them to more global acceptance. And for some people, probably marks the end of the classic period for that band. So then I was like, well, how do I choose one over the other? Because I love both these bands so much, and I love both these albums. And again, I had to take a look. If you would have asked me this back in, mid-late 80s, might have given you a different ranking here. But I've had to look at which of these two has aged better with me, which one I've enjoyed it more in my later years. And there was a clear winner. One of them I still love, but I don't love it as much as I used to back in the day. I still think it's absolutely terrific. And the other I've grown to love more and more and more. It's one of my favorite releases from the band. And this particular one, okay, a little bit of interesting history on this one. So released in January of 1984 in the UK, March 84 in Japan, and April 84 in North America. Produced by Martin Birch. Talking about Slide It In from Whitesnake. And I'm surprised at some of you because I saw all sorts of predictions. Some of you called it. Some of you called some of my other ones that I'm going to mention here. But so here we have an album that represents kind of like a changing of the guard within the band. So you had like the what many consider the classic lineup of Whitesnake, consisting of Mickey Moody and Ian Pace and Bernie Marsden, Neil Murray, okay, along with David Coverdale. John Lord also put in a spell with the band, and some changes. So obviously Bernie Marsden's gone. In comes Mel Galley, very talented guitar player, songwriter, and vocalist from Trapeze, to take the place of Marsden. Okay, you got a guy named Colin Hodgkinson coming in on bass, along with Cozy Powell. All right, Cozy, very notable, played with all sorts of, Michael Schenker Group and Rainbow and Jeff Beck and soon to be Black Sabbath and Yngwie Malmsteen, so on and so forth, and Emerson and Lake. But problems within the band. So, by this time, the relationship between Mickey Moody and David Coverdale, which was a very close relationship, singer, guitarist, both writing songs together, that relationship is becoming a little fractured, and lo and behold, we got Thin Lizzy opening up for Whitesnake on some tours where a red-hot young blonde guitar player named John Sykes kind of caught the eye of David Coverdale. Long story short, I think Coverdale was looking to go in a different direction, make the band bigger. That was the guy he wanted. So, said some not so nice things in front of Sykes to Moody. Moody got pissed off, and before you know it, Moody gives his resignation to the band. Of course, the album is already recorded. All right, Moody wasn't happy either. He felt that the album was moving too far away from the more bluesier Whitesnake sound. Didn't feel that Cozy was right for the band. Too heavy of a drummer. Didn't think that Mel Galley was a good fit. So Mickey's days were numbered. But they released the album in the UK with that lineup. Before you know it, the folks at Geffen had decided, you know what? I think we need to remix that album for the U.S. release coming up. So basically, back comes Neil Murray, in comes John Sykes, Moody's out. So all of a sudden, Moody's parts and Collins' parts are basically redone by Neil and John. You've got a kind of different sounding, brighter, beefier version of Slide It In for the U.S. markets, and you can now listen to both. All right, they're fairly similar, but they're different. I think the UK version sounds more like, Come and Get It and Saints and Sinners and all those albums that came before it. But I think for the U.S. market, which of course is the album that I've always known and loved, big, still bluesy, but cranking and heavy and just amazing songs. So here you got the opening title track, and again different track listing and sequencing on the UK version. Slow and Easy, which was the big FM radio staple back in the day. Okay, very kind of Zeppelin-y, kind of slow, heavy, slow and easy. Great guitars, right? Bluesy but still heavy. Love Ain't No Stranger, really great catchy anthem from the band. All or Nothing, blazing hard rocker. Gambler, another kind of moody, bluesy hard rocker. Guilty of Love, more of kind of like a hard rock and pop hooks. Hungry for Love, another kind of gritty, bluesy rocker. Give Me More Time, really memorable, great chorus. Spit It Out, probably the closest thing to kind of metal on the album, with some cranking John Sykes pinch harmonic squeals and riffs and stuff like that. And I gotta say, Mel Galley had a lot to do with the kind of success of this album. I think his guitar riffs and solos are excellent on here, and it's just a shame he developed was it carpal tunnel, I think, or something like that, and his time in the band was very, very brief. And then before you know it, Sykes is the lone guitar player in the band, and we know how that worked out, right? So, and Standing in the Shadow, another really good, memorable, melodic, emotional, bluesy hard rock tune. So top to bottom, pretty spectacular. If it wasn't for the 1987 album, which I absolutely love from Whitesnake, this would definitely be my favorite Whitesnake album. And again, 1984, I'm 18 years old, totally into this, going away to college for the first time, and then this is kind of like my, my big album of the year, along with another one. So my runner-up, like I said, if you would have asked me this back in the day, well, the three that I will mention, all ranked up there. I was totally into this because it was a return from one of my favorite bands. Their reunion was a big, big, big deal, not only for the album sales of this record, but for the tour. Tour did big business. You had the Mark II lineup back together again. Of course, I'm talking about Deep Purple's Perfect Strangers is going to be my runner-up. Again, if you like I said, if you were to ask me between these two back in the day, I might have said Purple, but I still really like this album a lot. I don't love it as much as I used to, but I still really, really enjoy it. But just not quite as much as the Whitesnake, I think. The latter part of my life, I think the Whitesnake has kind of risen above it just a little bit. But, here you got Blackmore, Gillan, Glover, Pace, and Lord back together again. And just a great album, some really great songs, some staples, some Deep Purple staples on this. Knocking at Your Back Door, title track, Under the Gun, Nobody's Home, Mean Street, Gypsy's Kiss, Wasted Sunsets, Hungry Days, and Not Responsible. Some really, really great tunes on here. Good production, okay, by Roger Glover, okay, who was producing the Rainbow albums right before then. He was a member of Rainbow along with Ritchie, and Rainbow got put to rest. Gillan got put to rest, and they're back for a little bit anyway. So you're probably curious as to what my third choice was, and a lot of you predicted it. Ride the Lightning by Metallica. Like I said, if we were to go back to this time period as an 18, 19, 20-year-old back in the mid 80s, it would have been Ride the Lightning easily. And while I still really love that album and appreciate its impact on me, the second half of my life, not as much, but still absolutely fantastic. And then, there were other great ones in consideration here. A lot of good ones. Wings of Tomorrow by Europe, Marillion's Fugazi, Grace Under Pressure by Rush, Dio, The Last in Line, Power Slave by Iron Maiden, Merciful Fate, Don't Break the Oath, Queensryche, The Warning, Dokken, Tooth and Nail, Toto, Isolation, Celtic Frost, Morbid Tales, Cirith Ungol, King of the Dead. I mean, those are some of my other favorites from this particular year. Defenders of the Faith, Judas Priest, right? So a lot of good stuff. Yngwie Malmsteen, Rising Force. So a lot of good ones that I was kind of looking at and thinking about. But, for me, the cream rose to the top. And Whitesnake, this is the album for me for 1984. So down in the comments below, list your favorite album from 1984 or your favorite albums, whichever you choose to do. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's all based on which ones we love that mean the most to us. And there you have it, 1984. Tomorrow, 1985. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Coming up later today, we've got Brian Slagle, Elliot Fulham, Steve Keeler, and myself. We're going to be counting down each our 10 favorite tracks from legendary heavy metal band Merciful Fate. That's coming up later today. Tomorrow, Jack Toledano's coming back on the show. We're going to give our top 10 songs each of Hammerfall. Drew a blank there for a second. What else? I'm hoping to get in this weekend. I'm going to rank the studio albums of the great Canadian band Max Webster. And then coming up this week, and in addition to a continuation of the favorite album of the year, moving in further into the 80s, going to have another first-time guest on the show who's going to be doing some top 10 songs of the Grateful Dead with me, as well as ranking the studio albums of fantastic progressive death metal band Nile, as well as some other stuff he and I are going to be working on as well. He and I are going to be doing some stuff with Molly Hatchet as well. So all sorts of cool stuff happening over the next few days. So you don't want to miss any of it. All right. Again, www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Have a good one, guys. We'll see you later on today. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Enjoy your weekend.